Intelligence, goodness, humanity, excitement, serenity. Over time, these are the things that change the musculature of your face, as do laughter and animation, and especially whatever peace you can broker with the person inside. It's furrow, pinch, and judgment that make us look older. Our mothers were right. They said that if you made certain faces, they would stick, and they do. But our mothers forgot that faces of kindness and integrity stick as well. Anne Lamott. Welcome to the Lost Traveler Podcast. I am your ever-loving host, Henry Cameron Allen, and I'm here today with Angela Bushman of the Twin Cities, Minnesota, my old stomping grounds. And Angela is a transformational life coach. Would that be accurate?
That is certainly one way to describe it. I coach executives, I coach all kinds of people. And so it's not just life coaching, but it's really about helping people navigate whatever it is that they want to change.
That's great. Well, welcome. We're so excited to get into this with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
What's your perspective on the life skills conversation or lack thereof globally right now? In your experience, in your work, are there any things that keep coming back to you about what are the essential life skills for our time?
I think the thing there's a couple of things actually that are striking me right now. And one of them is there seems to be a push to go into schools and say, no, you teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we're not here to teach kids critical thinking. We're not here to teach people how to be conscious. And I'll be honest, that movement scares me a little bit. Because I do think that the most critical thing we can be teaching the next generation is critical thinking skills and challenging the systems and the structures and asking, is this really how we want to live? We look at our priorities and we can tell what those are by our budgets. And here in the US, it's our military budget that is the biggest chunk. And, for the richest country in the world, or so-called richest country in the world at any rate, with all of these resources, what can we be doing differently to support the things we say we want? We say that we want, for example, fewer abortions, which, however you stand on that, I don't know whether it's bad or good, right? I don't make a judgment about that. I think it's healthcare. Mm-hmm. But if you'd like fewer, then how would you go about that from a policy perspective? There's one side that says you need to make it illegal, and the other perspective might be, comprehensive sex education, easy access to birth control, universal health care, support for families, if people do have children, early childhood care, Head Start, all-day kindergarten, meals in schools. There are all kinds of ways to approach policy decisions to support the outcomes that we want. And sometimes I think we go about it in ways that maybe aren't as effective. And I think also, policy decisions maybe should be different from our personal beliefs. We should be using data about outcomes to determine what's effective.
Yeah.
So that is one of the things that's on my mind a lot. But another one is that we're so conditioned to be in certain roles, and especially gender roles. And, you know, women especially were brought up to put the needs of others before themselves. And we get into a point in our lives and we hear, oh, women are so manipulative. And well, weren't taught to ask for what we want or need. We're suppressed in ways, and so we're taught to take everybody else's needs into consideration, so we don't know how to ask for what we want and need ourselves. And so that's something that still global, something that I can certainly have a greater impact on or help people with, more so than something like a policy discussion.
Right.
So
Well, it's all political, isn't it? I mean, when it comes down to even the conversation about gender itself,
the
it's
body is political.
it's a political discussion. And when I'm considering the clients that I work with in life skills mentorship, universal life skills, and to clarify for those who are just finding us now, when I talk about universal life skills, I'm talking about the essential skills that every human being learns, regardless of gender, regardless of geography, regardless of religious background or socioeconomic status. There are 8 billion people plus on the planet now, and we are all learning these same essential life skills. We're learning communication skills. We're learning financial literacy, emotional literacy, sexual literacy, good hygiene, trade, grief, right? These are things that every human being will learn in one measure or another. And it's not, these conversations on the Lost Traveler podcast are not about whether or not we learn these skills or who's learning them and who's not. It's a question of the measure of proficiency we are learning these skills and from whom.
Right.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. I'm Queen Bee Divine. The cure is conversation. And where can you find me? At bluntreflections.com, where I will be talking to guests from around the world that not only share their time, but their insights and their tips on how they became the best version of who they were meant to be. So if you're looking for a great story and a great time, check me out at bluntreflections.com. The cure is conversation. And remember, blase means to tell your story.
When I interview a lot of young people today, and I ask them, who do you learn these skills from, these life skills? They don't say their parents. They don't say their teachers. They're learning them from YouTube and TikTok, and they're learning them by observing the world around them. They're learning them from their peers. And I keep coming back to the question, why have we become, as parents, and you're a parent, I have been a parent, why are our parents, who we rely upon socially, globally, for being the foundational educators of life skills to children, why are we so deficient in so many of these, and where did it fall off the edge of the world? Because it's a struggle. It's a struggle. What do you think?
Exactly. Well, I think, gosh, what an interesting question. I do think, first of all, children are picking up those things from their parents by example and the people around them all the time through observation. And I think because it's part of their upbringing and it's their observation, it's implicit rather than explicit. So a lot of times as parents, we fail to sit down and make the implicit explicit by sitting down and talking about it. And I have tried to be very explicit with my children about certain things. And there are probably things that I've fallen short in. But for example, I've always been very transparent with them about money and finances and how things work. And, they're both in college. How are we paying for that college? A lot of that comes from their father passed away when they were middle school age children. And they get Social Security survivors benefits, most of which I put into college funds for them. And so now they go to college largely debt free, in large part, thank you to their late father.
Right.
So we talk about those kinds of things regularly. My son was a minor for longer. He collected those benefits for longer. He has a much bigger fund than she does. So, at the end, if things are unequal, if there's still money in his fund, I've talked about that's going to go pay off your sister's loans. And, even though it's quote unquote your money, it's something that we're using as a family to accomplish this business of getting two children through undergraduate school.
Yeah, it takes a lot of navigating.
So and he's very on board with that. He's like, I've never looked at it as my money, so it's really interesting having those conversations when you actually take the time and do it. We've always talked about I've always given my children an allowance, for example. We've talked about how some of that goes into savings and some goes for spending and some goes into sharing, which, we put towards causes. And we've chosen those causes together over the years, especially, when we've known people in the school who maybe classmates or friends or neighbors who have had cancer or something like that. We've been able to contribute to those funds. So we talk about all of those things. We talk about sexual politics and consent and all of those things. So I think a lot of Gen Z is way ahead of maybe where we were. I came up in the 80s, for example.
Yeah.
And our models were or mirrored in the John Hughes movies, for example, of the day.
That's right.
Very rife with rape culture. And, there's an example in 16 Candles, for example, where the supposed good guy, Jake, the person that everybody is hoping will end up with Sam, hands his intoxicated girlfriend off to somebody else and says, do whatever,
Right.
And that's I'm so happy to see that culture changing amongst our youth and a much greater understanding of what it means to responsibly engage in physical intimacy.
I think there are tipping points. We can look back and see where culture and society changes. And because I don't live in the States and wasn't raised there either, my dad was a diplomat, so I lived all over the world. And so I was able to glean a certain, pretty unique perspective, especially amongst American kids, about the universality of the human experience, and yet differences in culture and faith that that define a time, that define the zeitgeist of whatever time that we're in, whether it's coming out of Hollywood, which really people don't even think about, but it informs so much of the direction culture goes, and even internationally. It's had such a profound effect on the way we navigate adolescence and who do we turn to? Because I think every generation struggles with the generation gaps, and not
Mhm.
validating our parents' experiences because they couldn't possibly know. They grew up in a different time. Well, you know what? I've been so impressed with my connections with people, I would say over 70. They've seen some stuff. They've
Mhm.
seen humans and humanity to human, and they've seen the destruction of the planet, and they've seen greed and war, and the measure of what really matters.
Yes.
The world has never been completely a peaceful, happy, balanced place. It's always been a little pocket of chaos.
Yes.
Far back as humans have been writing, you know.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And it's, I think we came up during a time that was so marked by such an extended period of peace that it is sort of shocking, and or we were just unaware of some of what was going on internationally. We were insulated
mhm.
and
And distracted, I think.
distracted, and the world seems much closer now. Maybe since the age of the internet, perhaps, but all of those conflicts that we're seeing, um, what we're seeing in Afghanistan, all of that stuff seems much closer now than, it did during my youth, certainly.
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to remember when the Vietnam War was televised. And that felt close to home. Even as a little kid, I remember watching it as if I was watching a movie. And I reflected on that when 9/11 happened. And I was teaching in the Waldorf School in Minneapolis. And I remember being out on the play yard, and one of the teachers or the administrator came out and told the adults what was going on. And some of the older kids and the high school kids who were in the high school upstairs were more aware of what was happening and were devastated. And so we had to not only protect the little kids, but also hold the older kids through that moment. And when, I hate to use this phrase, but when the dust settled, um, and we were all able to gather our feelings and thoughts around it, one thing really stood out to me, and that was that I'm sure that these kids went home and saw the images on television,
Hmm.
whether it was their parents watching the news or going even to a neighbor's house, to play and it being on there. Um, Nobody told these kids that it wasn't happening over and over and over and over. The little ones,
Right. Right.
right? And what that must have done in their development to see these shocking images, to be told that this is real, this is what's reality, this is what's happening, and to hear the adults react to it, whether they were coming from, an Islamophobic perspective or a, uh, uh, you know, it's an inside job kind of a perspective.
Sure.
Kids were absorbing all of that, and I think you're right. The children do learn life skills from us. They learn what to do and what not to do,
Mhm.
oftentimes as well. But I think now it does feel like with the internet and with media influence that that's more the go-to when they're looking for answers. Shadow and Light LLC was established by Dave Roberts and Reverend Patty Farino, co-authors of When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. Their mission is to empower individuals to transcend life challenges by integrating spiritual practices with psychology to achieve peace. They are available for individualized spiritual counseling, virtual or in-person presentations and workshops to universities, organizations, and other interested groups, virtual or in-person book club meetings. For further information, go to psychologyprofessorandminister.com. And I don't think it's just kids.
Right.
I think it's
Right.
adults who are looking to the internet for answers. Now with AI, that's a whole new can of worms.
Absolutely. And I don't know how to process it all yet. It's coming rapidly, and it's hard to know how we can develop some policies and guidelines, and much less know how to navigate that on an individual basis, to make sure that we're engaging ethically, for example.
That's not always going to mean the same thing to different people either, culturally and
Right.
and otherwise. We're just saw in Uganda, for instance, where affirming your sexuality is now illegal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That freedom is being wrenched, and people are fearing life imprisonment for just being who they are. We see that in other parts of the world as well, and
It's
it's
terrifying.
unconscionable. It's terrifying. It's unconscionable in our time that we haven't fixed that yet.
Exactly. And that can't be more openly accepting of humans evolving into who they are.
There are
You
as
know,
many ways of being human as there are humans, and that's a fact.
mm-hmm.
That's not an opinion.
Right, right. Yeah, it's frustrating and uh, hopeful at the same time.
How is
Because,
it hopeful?
well, we see people standing up as examples, and Zoe Zephyr in Montana, for example, um, an elected representative in their state house who is fighting hard to be heard within the state house, but now has a little bit of a national profile, at least, um, because of being censored and excluded from being in the house, and being told she will not be heard. And it's shocking to me, the cruelty, the dismissiveness, and yet to see people standing strong in the face of that kind of discrimination and exclusion is really powerful. And I think it's powerful for our younger people. And then, here in my own state, a state that you've also called home, in Minnesota, we're now um what do we call it? A transgender, um I'm struggling with the language. I don't know exactly what they call it, but we're welcoming.
Like a safe state kind of a
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
situation.
like a refuge. But I don't believe we call it that. That's kind of a strange language for it, but we're, saying openly that we're a place of welcome, which doesn't also exclude us from, individual acts of violence too. So
Right.
it's
That's right.
certainly not a perfect utopia, but I'm glad that we're making a stand here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I remember hundreds of thousands of people marching. I remember women. I mean, I don't remember women being well, yeah, I guess I do. Not when the women got the vote, but I'm sure that the same things were happening to women then as are happening to trans women and men today, with that sort of, it's the same, it feels like the same quality of dismissiveness
Yes.
and lack of inclusion that not just women, obviously, but African American, Indigenous,
Yeah.
any marginalized group has experienced in the past. Why have we not fixed that yet?
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts about that, and it's really frustrating to see, somewhere along the line, um, feminist became a dirty word in
Mhm.
certain audiences. I am proudly a feminist. It simply means that we think people should be equal.
Yeah.
And people have manipulated the meaning of the word. And I know women my age who are reluctant to call themselves a feminist. And I want to ask them, do you own property in your own name? Do you have a credit card? Do you have your own bank account? Those things weren't even possible before the 70s.
That was in my lifetime. That was in I remember my dad had to sign off on everything. A woman
That's
was not a
ridiculous.
free agent. Yeah.
It's ridiculous if you think about it. And, women going to college, there are so many young women in college who are terrified to call themselves feminist. Well, you wouldn't be in college if it weren't for feminism. So thank the feminists for all the work they've done. The suffragists,
Yeah.
the women in the 60s leading the movement. We are where we are today because of them, and forgetting everything that they put in and all the work they did and the struggle for that, the measure of equality that we have, which is to say still shy of an equal rights amendment here in the US.
Yeah.
All of that is work done by feminists, and we should be proud.
I
And
know.
men should be proud to call themselves feminists.
I am. And you're right. I humanity is plagued and has been plagued throughout history with amnesia. And that's why I believe that telling our stories, reminding where we've come from, whose shoulders we stand upon, is so important. And I'm not going to say but, because that invalidates everything I just said, I think that in our time, labels have become so important that we define ourselves by a label. And I, like my grandmother taught me, I believe that labels are for food cans, not for human beings.
I love it.
And nobody's teaching that, it seems, that when you have a label on a food can or a food tin, as we say in Europe, it tells you precisely what's inside, everything you can expect from that can. If it's got a label that says peas on it, you're going to get peas, and maybe a little water, a little salt, but the thrust of it is pea. But when we label ourselves as feminist, or even our pronouns, it tells nothing about the contents of this vessel.
Right.
My grandmother said, when you label yourself, no matter what that label is, you're opening up to everyone else's interpretation of what it means to be you, and only you know you. So let your name be label enough. Let them get to know your good name. Be a good person first. People should smile when they hear your name. I love that.
That is such great advice.
balance, pain mitigation, range of motion, athletic performance, focus, memory, immune system support, and REM level of sleep. All this and more made possible affordably with no pharmaceuticals, no injections, or invasive treatments. Just socks, insoles, and patches made stronger with the tactile patterning of Vox Life products. Scientifically proven to work and guaranteed. Now in the USA, Canada, and the UK. Visit www.dianedinkmeyer.voxlife.com. That's Vox, VOXX, Life. You'll be glad you did. Has there been anybody in your lifetime that has been pivotal like that, who's dropped a pearl into your palm and given you something that's sort of helped you define yourself with a capital S?
So I think there probably have been several. I would say one of the most pivotal was my college writing professor, who was just so encouraging, but guided me to so many great resources. And I took, because I'm an introvert and a reader, I found so much of my inspiration through books. I think maybe the first really powerful one that I can recall was Ram Dass, his book, Be Here Now. And just meeting people where they are is what I took from that. He shares an anecdote of, time with his father, and he at this time was going about his life in robes and barefoot, and his father clearly thought that was nonsense and couldn't understand why his son had chosen this path. And when they shared time together, they would just go in the kitchen and cook together or bake or just be. And it broke down all of that judgment, all of the external things, and just allowed Ram Dass to experience that time together with his father without having to be in reaction to his father's thoughts or judgments on who he was becoming. And I think that's so powerful.
I'll put a link to that in the description for listeners who want to go and seek it out and read it, because I think that those books that we've read at pivotal times that were handed to us by someone we respect are great tools for finding ourselves. One that really was a pivotal one for me was Illusions.
Oh yeah, by
Richard Bach. I'll put a link to that too. Great tool for me. It was the Tales of a Reluctant Messiah, which I loved. I read that when I was 14, and I read it in a night. I did not put it down.
Wow.
I gift it to a lot of people.
Yeah. I would go on to say The Seat of the Soul, Gary Zukov, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind by Deepak Chopra. Those were some of my, early readings, and have really shaped a lot of, how I've approached my adult life, I think, and, continue to influence me in my work. So I think that's just really, really powerful. But of course, I've also been to therapy, and I think that can be so powerful and healing and important for people as well. And it scares some people to go, but it can be just incredibly transformative.
Yeah, it can be like a Pandora's box, and that is very, very scary when you know that something's going to get unlocked, and then you've got to deal with it.
Yeah. But on the other hand, you get great tools. I mean, I'll never forget my therapist telling me that it is not my responsibility to manage how my then partner, the father of my children, responds. It's not my job to manage his feelings. His feelings are his responsibility. And I just felt this weight lift off my shoulders. It was like a revelation. I had been working so hard to kind of steer the ship in a certain direction, but also do it without ruffling feathers. And she's like, who cares if the feathers get ruffled? Do it. You need to, you need to do the right thing for your family and your children.
Yeah.
And that was powerful. That was powerful.
And your children learn from that. They watch you, whether you realize it or not. They're watching you figure those things out. And there's a great I don't know, there's a great gift in being aware that little eyes are upon you. And that goes for not only parents and teachers, but even people who don't have children of their own or who are not around children a whole lot. We are of the parenting generation. If you're capable of having children, which in some cultures is as young as 13, right? And we look at, I was raised Jewish. We have our bar and bat mitzvah around that time as well. It's where you're stepping across the threshold between your adolescence and your young adulthood. You're stepping into the recognition by your community that you have this potential to be a contributor, right? Yeah. And I think that's a pivotal time as well. We don't do enough coming of age ceremonies for kids, but one of the things when I do, and I have facilitated coming of age ceremonies, one of the first things that we talk about is that younger kids than you are looking to you for how to be in the world. And when you become aware of that, whether you are an adolescent or whether you are an adult, it changes your posture. It changes the way you use language, the words that you choose, right? The way that you walk into a room, the energy that you carry with you, the energy that you absorb into yourself, and the energy that you put out into the world. Right? Your name is the expression of your identity, right? Going back to your good name, right?
Yeah.
On your terms.
I'm laughing at that because I actually have an intuitive mentor who, through whom I've learned intuitive energy clearing. And one of the things she does regularly, or she teaches to do, is to clear the energy around your name. So I laugh at that because it's a double-edged sword, right? We have all the good equity we've built up by being a good human out there in the world behind our name. And then we also have some unhelpful beliefs about who we are that may be holding us back. So when you said that, I just thought of how, sometimes, and the thing is, if you do an intuitive energy clearing, and the phrase you would say is clear and transmute everything that is Angela, in my case. And that's not saying I'm erasing myself or my identity. It only clears out the stuff that's not true. You can't erase the truth, but you can shed the baggage, your own associations of your past failures or misgivings or stumbles along the way, and create a new reality or continue to evolve your identity into who you're becoming by shedding some of that older baggage.
A guy wire is a tensioned cable that is designed to enhance the stability of a freestanding structure. Think of me as your guy wire in terms of life skills mentoring. You're perfectly capable of standing stably on your own 2 feet, but I'm a cable that can enhance your stability. I'm available for individual or couples counseling, life skills mentorship, child loss grief support, LGBTQ plus support. I can also officiate weddings, end-of-life ceremonies, baby namings, invocations, or whatever guidance you may need. I serve all genders, all ages. Sessions are affordable, discreet, private, and conducted online. Find me at guy-wire.org. Book your appointment today. Well, it's like be here now. I mean, it's exactly what Ram Dass was talking about.
Yeah.
Everything that is not in the here and now, this moment, only lives in your imagination.
Right.
Whether it's the past or whether it's the future.
Right.
Your entire biography and the biographies of every single person in your DNA back to the first mama, as well as mine, have led to this moment, has led to this, have prepared us for this conversation. Isn't that amazing? That's like, it's such a simple concept, but it's the absolute truth is that no one is promised a next moment. And you get to choose, as you're saying, intuitively, who you're going to be in the next moment. That's a very powerful place to sit, isn't it?
Right. And I think, you were talking about the past and memories, and from a coaching perspective, we're taught that we have a thought, it generates a feeling. It's through our feelings that we take action. We're going towards pleasure and avoiding pain, and that leads to our results. And the past, our memories, they aren't here and now. They aren't in this moment. They aren't truth. They are our thoughts about something that happened. A memory is a thought. But beyond that, our bodies have memories. Our vagus nerve has memories about what has happened in the past. So that's why I like to use sort of a integrated approach in coaching, and also bring in intuitive energy clearing and help remove some of that stuff, especially since we've all had some form of trauma or another throughout our life.
Well, and the science of epigenetics, which is still sort of unfolding, is showing conclusively that we carry ancestral memory in our DNA and genetics. So sometimes the triggers that we experience are not anything that we've experienced ourselves, but somewhere somebody passed that trauma onto us.
Yes.
But it's through love, hopefully. I mean, not every child is born out of love, but I think, certainly there's love in the equation, even if it's just the act of birth is an act of love. And that's where I sort of choose to sit with that whole, sort of confusing muddle of feelings and thoughts and actions, is that if we can recognize that we are simply the product of a whole lot of love, that's a good frequency to vibe at, I think.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And it's interesting you talk about this energy that's passed on through our DNA. So often we're taught to think about karma as something that, goes around, what goes around comes around. If you do something bad, that it's going to come back to haunt you, etc. And bad people are going to get what's coming to them. And I have more recently come to another way of looking at karma, which I think might be even more useful. That is energy in search of resolution. So, for example, if your father was unfaithful to your mother, you may be carrying around this energy that causes you to attract a partner who is unfaithful to you. So
It's familiar.
It's familiar, and it comes back to you because it's seeking resolution, because it's seeking process. It's seeking to be released from your energetic field. And I think that's such an interesting, different, more helpful way to view karma.
With
As
each challenge comes opportunity.
right.
Another way of saying that.
We keep hearing, life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And that's an expression of whatever's coming up. The challenges that you're having in any given moment are your opportunity to process through and release and finally free yourself from that energetic pattern, whether you're conscious of it having happened in your past or not. So that's, to me, both powerful and informative and something that we can take action on.
Yes.
I think that's enormous. And I think something else you mentioned was the frequency that we want to vibe at. There's love, there's joy. And to me, probably the most powerful of all is gratitude.
Yeah.
That's acknowledging that we are beneficiaries of something outside of and maybe more powerful than ourselves. And when we can get in that energy, we make ourselves receptive. When we're thanking our higher power or the universe or whatever it is that you believe in, we're putting out an energy that says, yes, more of this, please. And we start to recognize it more and make it more part of our lives, and as a result become more generous people.
And that helps us deflect the lower vibrations that are constantly coming at us from family, from culture, from internet, social media, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that we already have the tools. It's just how do we ramp up our proficiency? And just like someone will go to if they want to learn Chinese cuisine, for instance, they'll go and find someone who's an expert in Chinese cuisine to learn that skill. If you want to learn a language other than your native tongue, you go and you find an expert to teach you. You go and you find, if you want to be better at math or you want to learn a sport, you go and find an expert to teach you. And it's no different with life skills.
Right.
And there are coaches and mentors out here we have our own level of proficiency in certain skills.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they're the ones that match the frequency that's calling to you and calling from you. Right. And so you have permission to go and look for an executive chef of life skills to teach you, how to ramp up your skills. But the only person who can tell you that you need to ramp up your proficiency is you. And that's where the intuitive comes in. You know you better than anyone knows you. Your generous sponsorship and individual support of the Lost Traveler podcast benefits the Lost Travelers Club, a charitable project under the fiscal sponsorship of United Charitable, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. The Lost Travelers Club focuses primarily on the needs of parents who have outlived their beloved children. We recently launched our new Brain Candy Project wing, providing art supplies to children still struggling with critical or terminal health-related conditions. We hope to raise enough funds to launch Brain Candy, an arts and literature magazine created by and for these young people. Find out more at www.braincandy.online. Thank you. That leads me to, and I can't believe it's already been almost an hour. I could talk forever. This is great. This is exactly the vibe I love. And be thinking of this too. I ask each one of my guest co-hosts to come up with a question for my next guest co-host for them to answer. And so my last guest, Rahul Karan Sharma, has asked a question for you to answer. And that question is, Angela, what habits have you developed within yourself that have given you miraculous results?
Practicing gratitude. I can say very simply, there was a point in my life, in my younger life, when I was starting out in my career. I was traveling. I was going out to bars and restaurants and nightclubs, and I'm fairly certain that from the outside, my life looked enviable. And on the inside, I felt like life was passing me by and nothing was working, and my friends were getting promoted and I was stuck. And there were a couple of things going on, but I at the time, and I still do, I see a chiropractor who practices applied kinesiology, which is basically having an energy dialogue with your body about what it wants to heal. And he led me through this process, and he was just checking out my organs, and he told me that I had lac in my ovaries. I thought, this guy's nuts. What kind of a thing to say is that?
Lac in your ovaries. I've never heard that before.
No, right. And I've come to learn over the years, we do store emotions in our organs. Grief, for example, tends to live in the lungs. Anger lives in the liver. So there are some, commonalities about where we process or store our unprocessed emotions. And, that fact notwithstanding, like at the time I thought he was legit crazy. And he said, let's explore what your body needs to resolve this. And he said, you need a lifestyle change. And I was terrified of what that meant, because I thought I was living the life, right? And he went through this process of using muscle testing and came up with, you need to practice gratitude, because the lack was something financial in my life. And he had asked me, what do you need financially? What's going on with you financially? And I said, housing prices are going up and interest rates are going down. And I feel like I had better get in there and make some kind of investment, or I might be priced out. So certainly that's a lack-based, fear-based response, right? The market forces notwithstanding, that was my reaction to it. At the same time, I had two cars. I had a sports car, and Minnesota winters can be harsh and they can be snowy, and they are not ideal for driving around a sports car. So I stored it in the winter, and I had been looking for a winter beater, so to speak, kind of an older used car that would just get me through the snow. And instead I found myself a lease return luxury vehicle, and which I loved, and which also had a very sporty feel as I drove it. And I lived in an apartment at the time, parked on the street. So I would be, driving to the car wash and then waxing a car because it was, getting tree junk on it all the time. Then I'd go take the other one, and then I'm paying insurance on 2 cars, and they're all parked on the street. And this is nonsense, right? As a young single woman. So I knew I needed to sell a car. And so I had told him these things, and they were not the answer. He used muscle testing to say, this is not the thing you need. And he eventually had come to practice gratitude. So he gave me a very brief instruction on how I should go about doing this, but I was largely left to figure it out on my own. And I just started focusing more on gratitude. And within 8 weeks, I had sold my sports car for more than I'd paid for it, even though it had, in the interim, been in a hailstorm and had a salvage title. And I had gotten an insurance payout that was also more than I paid for it. So it was the car that kept on giving.
Yeah.
And within 12 weeks of this, I wasn't actively looking for a house at the time, but a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, another friend of ours is moving across the country for a new job and selling his condo. Would you like to take a look? And so within 3 months of starting to practice gratitude, a home came to me out of the ether, and remember, the original issue here was this so-called lack in my ovaries, which
Lack in your ovaries, right?
Absolutely insane. I was in this relationship that I wasn't sure was going anywhere. Well, within 6 months, I was pregnant with my first child. So maybe that did not unfold in perhaps the most ideal way at the time, but it unfolded in the way it was meant to for us. And that child is now an adult, navigating her later college experience and becoming somebody who is thriving and forming beautiful relationships and navigating her experience in the world. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. So all of that, because I began practicing gratitude, and I have used, I would call that miraculous, just to close that out. But I have used gratitude then to continue to create what I want to create in life, and used it to attract new jobs, used it to advance my life in the direction that I've wanted it to go. So that is my practice that opens me to miracles.
Absolutely. I since my son was a little boy, we started a practice where every single day, and I still do this, before I allow myself to open my eyes and meet the new day, when I'm already awake or coming awake, I go down the list and name everything I am grateful for. And sometimes it's 10 things, sometimes it's 20 things, sometimes it's 100. And it takes me a while to open my eyes. But to meet your day, having named everything and meditated on everything that you experience gratitude for, whether it's, the sun itself, or just the fact that your dog didn't poop on the carpet that day or whatever, I mean, the small things,
Sometimes we are going through difficult, challenging phases of our lives, and it's hard to come up with anything for which we can be grateful. So, to your point, we can be grateful that the sun rose again.
That's right.
At the end of the day, we can be grateful that the day is over. There is always something to be grateful for, even in the darkest times. And in fact, as a practice, gratitude has been researched so much now, just in the past 20 years or so, but especially that research continues to accelerate. And especially at UC Davis, they're doing this work. But one of the things they found is that if we can be grateful for something that's happening to someone else. So, for example, Chef Jose Andres, who takes his World Central Kitchen to places where there are disasters or wars or whatever and feeds people, just feeds people. If we can be grateful that that man is, through the power of his networks and resources and talents, is feeding people in need, that itself, meditating on that, feeling the, having the thoughts and feeling the feelings and letting that feeling turn into that emotional chemical response in our bodies,
And therefore action, right?
that is powerful. It's tremendously powerful. And that, to your point, I mean, the kinds of actions, gratitude is associated with health, with better eating, with exercise, with all kinds of things that come from it. So there's a lot there to mine.
Hey, are you like me, always looking for ways to make a positive impact in the world? Well, then join me in sponsoring Desire Childcare Organization. We are a legally incorporated, fully volunteer-based organization in Uganda, committed to providing essential needs, holistic arts-based education, and a safe family environment to 33 vulnerable children, ages 2 to 14. Your monthly sponsorship can help improve the lives of these kids toward a better future. Desire Childcare is different from any other charity I know because, well, we have zero administrative overhead. Every penny goes to the kids. And we have a plan toward self-sufficiency through agriculture, so support is temporary. It's kind of like a leg up. Visit desirechildcare.org to learn more and get involved. Let's empower and inspire the Desire kids together. Thanks.
I could literally go on for hours about
We
this.
totally could. And we'll have to come back for a part two, because I think it's so good to have this conversation, because the more we put this out there, the more people are going to hear it, reflect on it, and apply it. They can't use the tools that we use the way we use them, but they can take what we're laying out on the table for free and say, I can synthesize this with the tools I already have in my kit and create new and unique tools for myself and for my life. And that is something that I'm grateful daily for. I'm mentoring a young man in Uganda right now who has single-handedly rescued 33 compromised and vulnerable children from the slums.
That is amazing.
Streets.
Heard you
Many
talk
of these kids are orphaned, and yeah, I mean, Desire Childcare Organization, it's the real deal. And I am so grateful that by happenstance, Bugingo came into my life. He was looking for, sort of casting a wide net, looking for experts in early childcare education, because a number of these children who are ages 2 to 14 are not school age, and he didn't know how best to serve them. And so he wanted to glean those tools. And all he has is his mobile phone. And so he's looking, putting it out there on social media. Is anybody an early childhood expert that I can, help these kids? And somehow he found a friend of mine in Gloucester, Massachusetts, who is an expert in early childhood education. And my friend contacted me and said, Henry, Gringo needs a mentor, and I think you're it. You came to my mind immediately when he was talking to me. This kid's the real deal. And he's the same age as my son would be now had he lived. And that, I noticed these things.
Yeah.
And just since last August, we have gotten all the kids out of the slums. We have gotten them good food. We've gotten them livestock and the means to pay for their education.
Amazing.
It's absolutely miraculous, and it all comes from gratitude. It all comes from gratitude.
Talk about miracles. Wow.
Truly, truly. So let's wrap this up with your question to my next guest co-host.
One of the questions that I like to ask people regularly is, what are you doing to cultivate joy in your life on a regular basis? I think it's so powerful. Our brains are wired to survive. And because of that, it's easy for us to spot the threats and see what's wrong and find ourselves becoming critical, and we recognize so readily what we don't want, but we would benefit so much more by focusing on what it is we do want, what it is we do love, what it is that brings us joy, what it is that we're grateful for. And I think that's just such a powerful step.
Can I offer an exercise to wrap this up? Because a lot of my clients struggle with answering that question. What do you want?
Yes.
If I asked, what don't you want? It comes fast and easy, and it's, a litany. And so the exercise, if any of the listeners are struggling to figure out what you want, is to write the list of things you don't want. Write it on the left side of the paper. Well. Right?
Exact way, by the way. The exact
and then write the opposite of each one of those on the opposite side of the paper. Or the contrast, right?
The contrast, yeah.
Right? And once you have that, and it could be 5 things, it could be 10 things, it could be 100 things, but however many, write the contrasting thing on the opposite, on the right side of the page. So you've got your don't wants on the left, and there on the right is your list of wants, your foundational list of wants. Tear the paper in half.
Once you're started with that list of wants, you're able to add to it and refine it.
Yes.
And revisit it. That's and get into how it feels. How does it feel when I have all of these things in my life? And that's the powerful part, right? Is when you're generating that emotion. And your brain doesn't know the difference between what is real and what is made up. So you can create that future for yourself.
That's right. We are the manifestors of our destiny. We do and manifest reality. And it's all in that frequency. The next step that I take to a different level is you tear the paper in half, you burn the negative list, get it off the planet, don't even think about it. And focus there is your list of wants. Fold it up and put it in a metal box like an Altoids tin or something. Go out into nature, which is really important that we go out into nature more than we do. And find a tree or a bush or something in your garden. There, you know where it is. Dig a hole and bury it. Plant it in the earth like a seed. And every time you achieve one of those wants, go and dig it up, cross it off the list, and plant it again.
I love
Keep,
that.
keep it in the earth so that
Such
it will keep growing and manifesting.
such a beautiful ritual.
I love it. I love it. I teach that to a lot of 14-year-olds.
Fantastic.
Angela Bushman, this has been an amazing time, and I hope we get to do this again. It's always a pleasure to connect.
I would love that. It has been such a blessing. Thank you so much for this conversation. And I just also want to revisit, we started in a place talking about some pretty challenging things. We brought it back around to gratitude and just feel how much this energy has changed and calmed, and it feels so good to be alive in this moment.
Absolutely. Happy to
Present
share
in
it.
this moment.
Happy to share it with you. We're both sitting here with big grins on our faces. That's a good button for this whole conversation. Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you, listeners. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to Season 4 of the Lost Traveler podcast with Henry Cameron Allen. Visit me online at henryallen.org. Thank you to my guests, and thank you for tuning in. Let's keep striving for a better world together.